And we're holding court this morning with Dr. Otieno Amolo, who is a member of parliament from Rarieda. Also, we do have with us Dr. Miguna, who is a consummate lawyer. We have with us Senator Kimani Wamatangi, who is the senator from Kiambu. Eagerly waiting also for member of parliament from Kikuyu, Kimani Ichung'wa, and also Boni Khalwale to join us much later in the course of the program. But let's begin with you, Miguna. Are we likely to have this general election? Because it seems also Jubilee is fronting this idea that, yes, NASA want to create a constitutional crisis so that we may not really have an election, that they want a nusu mukate. What do you see from your crystal ball?
Thank you, Debal. Eventually, it's not a general election. It's a fresh presidential election.
Fresh, yes.
There will be, eventually, in my view, a fresh presidential election. But I don't think it will happen on October the 17th. It's not conceivable that it will happen. Firstly, because that date was arbitrarily announced in a manner that suggested that those in charge of the IBC had not digested and internalized the ruling by the Supreme Court. Secondly, as it is now apparent, there is a problem with Morpho, the French company that is supposed to be providing technological infrastructure,
yes,
to the IBC. And I have heard reports, I've read reports, that they have indicated that they are not even ready in terms of their configuration or reconfiguration. I don't know who told them to reconfigure, but they say they want to reconfigure some of the KIMS kits and all of that, and they need a bit of time to do that. And they're saying the time allowed will not have been sufficient by October the 17th. But more fundamentally, the IBC has been indicted by the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. The IBC has been found to have committed criminal offenses. Illegalities are criminal offenses in subverting the will of the Kenyan people. The IBC's leadership has not changed. The chair remains the same. The secretariat remains the same. Everyone who bungled the August 8th election, which actually was not an election because I don't believe an election happened. Maraga stated on behalf of the majority of the Supreme Court that the result of the presidential election were not just invalid, they were null and void. As a result, it is assumed in layman's language that that election did not happen. So the figures being dangled by Jubilee regarding the so-called will of the Kenyan people, those figures do not exist in law and as fact, as found and determined by the Supreme Court. So you can't continue to dangle figures that are fake, that are fictitious. So no, elections cannot happen on October the 17th, and a new date would have to be found. But that new date will have to be found following the overhaul of the body that bungled the election. You cannot go back to an election under the same people essentially running the show, the same people that committed the irregularities and illegalities. So no, elections will not happen on October the 17th, and rightly so, in my view.
All right. Let's hear from Dr. Otieno.
Well, first, Debal, I agree with Dr. Miguna, so I would not quite repeat what he said. Only to say two things. First of all, you'll remember a fortnight ago I was in this show.
Yes.
When IBC had just announced the date of 17th, and the question was posed whether that date was appropriate. What I said then, which I must repeat now, is that it is not a matter of whether the date was appropriate. It is a matter of whether the IBC would be able to do the things it needs to do before that date. I ventured then that it wouldn't, and what's coming out clearly is that it is impossible. It is a fundamental mistake that is now emerging that IBC went ahead to announce a date before it had looked at what it needed to do.
Yes.
Clearly, they had not even consulted their own suppliers, Sarfa and Morpho, and that's a grave mistake. I have had sight of the letter which I've just seen now, and which has been extensively reported in The Nation, that Safran Morpho have written to IEBC chair, that letter invites very, very fundamental questions. At least 8 fundamental questions, which perhaps I would have time to go to later. But it is very intriguing that about 19 days after the judgment of the Supreme Court,
yes,
and about 41 days after the August election, Saffron Mofo then write to the chair of IBC. It is not clear what they are responding to, but they appear to be responding to some letter which has not been shared, or to something. Then they appear to raise 2 issues, that there have been issues of hacking and issues of manipulation of results. Then they proceed to say that they've looked at their system and there was no hacking. They do not touch on the question of manipulation. And the issues, as you know, was always that in collusion, some of the officers entered the system and manipulated the results. They don't touch on that.
Yes.
They then come and say that they did an internal audit. They do not say who invited them to do that. They do not say what were the terms of reference. They do not even attempt to explain why they refused to do that when the Supreme Court asked them to do that. And then they proceed to say that for them, it is okay if then we can have an external audit. An external audit, they are inviting an external audit when we have very few days.
Yes.
At a time, they had refused to do the initial audit. Their letter is very curious because they don't even attempt to explain why they refuse to comply with the court order. But as Miguna says curiously, they then say that they are going to reconfigure the systems. But there are 2 other things they say. They say that they have decided to back up the original data, Backing up the original data without having opened it in the first place means the integrity is already compromised. Then they also say that if the Supreme Court decides that the RTS has to be hosted in Kenya, we've already gone through a process where one of the fundamental questions in the Supreme Court was why and whether this, this whole system was, hosted in Kenya. The IBC went ahead to give a new date without examining that. Now, these people then come and say that if the Supreme Court decides, one would have thought that, as they're saying, if it needed 30 days, then right from immediately the issue arose in the Supreme Court, or at least once the judgment was issued, the move to have all these hosted in Kenya should have been there, without even going to the issue, the fundamental issue that goes to sovereignty. How can you have a system like this, which hosts the sovereignty of a people, hosted outside the country, which is above, way beyond your reach? But that's not all. They then now say that they are going to have to reconfigure afresh 45,000 kits. Their kits had a fundamental problem. Their kits have been stated that of the 45,000,
yes,
only 2 actually transmitted results. They don't address that. All they say is that whatever happened, we have decided to back it up. It can be looked at later. For now, we have to reconfigure and then transmit. If those had a problem initially, how would we know that this will not have a problem? But this is what kills it. They then say that either way, the date of 17th is impossible. They don't even say, as I saw suggested elsewhere, that maybe they need up to 26th of this month, of October. They don't say that. Basically, they leave it open to question that 17th is not possible, and therefore it is not possible to comply. Which is why we are saying, and we have consistently said, that Saffron Mofo have fundamental issues. Saffron Mofo are fundamentally compromised, and Saffron Mofo cannot deliver an election that complies with the dictates of the Constitution or the law as demanded by the Supreme Court.
Okay. Let's hear a reaction also from Senator Kimani Wamatangi.
Yes. Well, I think, in my view, the starting point should be where NASA stopped. Before they addressed any of these issues, the first declaration they have made,
yes,
is that there will be no elections, and they're not going to be boycotting. And if the rider is, first they've made a declaration, there will be no elections. But then they had a rider that if then we have to go to the election, that is if they have to go to the election. Then they lay a whole retinue of conditions. And the question I believe first we should be asking is, we know that there exists a Supreme Court ruling or decision with timelines which are constitutional, 60 days. So first question is, when they lay out all these conditions as they have laid out, are they realistically saying that they are laying those conditions with a view of going to the election within those 60 days and imagining or believing that it is tenable to have them fulfilled? Because if you listened to what Raila was saying and Wetangula repeated, is that they are not going to go to the election until those conditions they have set are fully met. And you don't need an interpreter or a wise man to tell you that those conditions are intentionally laid to make it impossible for them to comply with that constitutional deadline. And you see, look at all this, listen to all that discussion, even about, and I appreciate what Wakili is saying. But even as you extrapolate on the issues of what bedeviled or what issues you would have with companies like Otimofo, you have already laid it out even before you say what they should have done, that they should not be part of this of the elections which are coming. So indeed, whatever they can do or not do is not even part of the considerations, because one of the declarations made there by Raila in his address is that Al Ghuraya and Mofo will not be part of the electoral management supplier considerations. So if they have already ruled out, then what are they saying? Now, lastly, because in following with what Wakili was saying, and because they're the ones who laid the case and prosecuted it in court, their case was built entirely on errors that occurred during transmission, not between when the voter took his ballot and went to the ballot box and cast his vote. They didn't build a case against that to say that there was anything wrong until that point. And what you are saying, and probably that is why I believe I myself and many other Kenyans will be eagerly awaiting to hear what this detailed ruling will be saying tomorrow. Because juxtaposed against what the same court had said in the minor KI case, that the final result is the one declared at the polling station. And I don't know probably what case they've been trying to build after that. And then now, the fact that they themselves have built a case around transmission of the results after the act of finally putting the ballot paper in the box, and thus at that point the election is legitimate. Then what you are saying is that you have a legitimate result inside ballot boxes, which has not been disputed. But they're disputing the rest of the process. And so, I believe that they have put up all these excuses and reasons because, one, they know that the results contained in there were clear, they were definite, and they were outright in who won. And I repeat, will yield the same results. Right. And that's why they have to try and find a way of making sure that there is no way there is going to be an election. And the issue here, the aim is to create a paralysis of the Constitution.
But if they have suspicion that we've read just our first story that also NASA principal is accusing the French-based company, that is Mofo, of bribing an unnamed senior IBC official, and a government officer 200 million shillings each to acquire the tender to supply Kenya's electronic polling or poll management system. In light of these accusations, do you think also they should not really have the bugbears and fears that Mofo should continue to supply the same kits as well? Let's hear from
Thanks, Dubana.
Ichung'wa.
And let me just start from there, because I did hear the former Prime Minister and his brigade talk about that yesterday. I'll tell you, one of the other things I did ask here, the former Prime Minister and the NASA brigade ask, is for IEBC to explain to Kenyans how they procured Saffron Mofo. And Dibal, I would just like to jog the memory of the former Prime Minister and his brigade, especially those who were in the Grand Coalition cabinet then, because the former Prime Minister was then the Prime Minister and Supervisor of Government Ministries, all government ministries, that Saffron Mofo and Raila Odinga know each other very well. Indeed, yesterday, if you played the clips that you took in Busia, you will hear former Minister for Constitutional Affairs and Justice, Ichung'wa Malwa, categorically state that the person who introduced Saffron Mofo to the subcommittee that he was chairing on elections in 2013 is none other than Raila Odinga. Therefore, if Raila Odinga wants to know who brought Saffron Mofo to this country, and who introduced them to IEBC, and the subcommittee, the cabinet subcommittee on elections that he chaired in 2013, then we just need to jog his own memory. Then he will know. And the other thing that you find in government records, if we were privy to these records, and Ichung'wa Malwa, fortunately, is still alive, and he lives in this country. You can ask him. Indeed, I wish you had invited him to sit on this seat and tell us, besides introducing Saffron Mofo to this country, the cost in 2013 of the BVR kits that later failed for us to get to where we are, to procure new kits, were initially the budget was about 4 billion shillings, but that mysteriously moved to 9 billion shillings without any substantive change in the system that they were providing or even in the numbers of the kits they were providing. Therefore, if you want to talk about bribery and what happens between Saffron Mofo and people who may have been bribed, let us first go back to 2013. Let us ask Raila Odinga what happened, what moved the price from 4 billion to 9 billion shillings. But I want to identify myself with the sentiments of my senator, Wamatangi, that all the issues you hear about Saffron Mofo, about Al Gurea, about certain officers at the commission, I'm seeing in page 5 of your paper now even Safaricom, Telcom are part of this grand conspiracy to do what they say is stealing their votes. They are all geared towards one thing: ensuring that we do not have an election on the 17th of October, or whichever other date IEBC may change, because I think it's quite clear from what we are being told. And I did hear my good friend, Advocate Atienda Omolo, say that we are not being told which other date. But I think by deduction, if you are told we can only take 30 days to reconfigure the kits, then count 30 days from today if we were to decide today. And I did hear last night, IBC commissioners are still deliberating on whatever other day they may give us. Therefore, let NASA tell us,
thank you.
Dibal, if they are telling us, as Wamatangi said, that there shall be no elections in October, not whichever date in October.
Thank you.
Before the lapse of 60 days.
Of course.
How do they intend to stop this country from having elections constitutionally?
Thank you. Well, let's stop it at that right now before we take a short break. And of course, even that is contingent upon the meeting that will be happening tomorrow between NASA and Jubilee, so we'll know the way forward as well. So we want also to take a short break right now. When we come back, we'll circle back with Miguna to tell us, yes, he was in government by then as an advisor to the Prime Minister. Is he privy to this particular information about Saffron Mofo as well? So we'll take a short break right now. Welcome back. You're watching People and Politics here on Decision 2017. Of course, the conversation continues with our panelists this morning. I'm holding court with Dr. Otieno Molo, who is a member of parliament from Rarieda. Also, we do have with us Dr. Miguna, who is a lawyer. We do have with us member of parliament from Kikuyu, Kimani Ichung'wa, and senator from Kiambu. This is Kimani Wamatangi. We continue with the discussion, and of course we promised when we circle back that Miguna is going to give us an information whether he is privy to this particular happening way back in 2013, where it is claimed by Honorable Ichung'wa that Raila Odinga also was privy to, of course, that contract being given to Saffron Mofo. And Miguna, you're saying by then...
The problem I have with the media and Jubilee is that you are as imprecise as the people who designed the system that rigged the elections on August 8th. Let me finish. Very imprecise in language, very imprecise on facts. I stopped working for the Grand Coalition government in August 2011. That was more than 2 years before this beast called Saffron Mofo or Mofo surfaced in Kenya. So I will dismiss that comment with the contempt it deserves. Let me go back to the issues. We are here because of a bungled election. It is a fact.
Yes.
It is a fact that the court has found, because Jubilee is trying to run away from this issue, but we will not allow it to happen. We are here because of a sham election. We know who conducted this sham election. We know who gained out of that sham election. President Uhuru Kenyatta was declared illegally as a duly elected president of Kenya. That has been overturned by the Supreme Court. Now they have been shouting about the will of the people as if Miguna, for instance, is not a citizen of Kenya. That is also my will. You see, Abraham Lincoln once said that we, the people, are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts, not to subvert the Constitution, but to protect the Constitution against men who are perverting the Constitution. Not for them to subvert the Constitution. So the will lies in the people. The people are supposed to protect the Constitution against being perverted. And in this case, the Supreme Court said that the IBC perverted the Constitution. Now, I heard Honorable Wamatangi say that the will of the people is in the ballot. Now, ask yourself the question, because I studied logic, and I'm going to teach him a bit of logic. Ask yourself the question. A voter has voted, and the vote is in the ballot box.
Yes.
How is that vote evidenced? How is that vote actualized? How do people know about my vote? The only way you know about my vote is that that vote will have to be counted and will have to be recorded on a form. That form then has to be signed and has to be transmitted to be announced by someone. So if, for instance, you do not count my vote correctly, which is what happened, the votes were not tallied, counted, and the results announced correctly, that is a subversion of my will. If the vote that I cast, the tallies of that vote, are not accurately transmitted pursuant to the constitutional remit and the law, again, you perverted the Constitution and subverted my will. If the person, the returning officer, announcing my vote, my will, is not going to do that in a manner that is in consonant with the Constitution and the law by declaring the accurate number, again, my will is being perverted, has been subverted, and the Constitution perverted. So this shouting about the fact that we go to the ballot is a red herring. My will is not in the ballot. My will has been subverted by those who did not record it correctly.
Thank you.
Now, to your second point, because this is where you started. You said there are threats about constitutional changes by those who would want to subvert the Constitution. It is true. We have had His Excellency the President threatening to fix judges. We have had him threatening publicly to revisit, and he said, we shall revisit the Constitution, meaning that they want to change the Constitution. We've had their hounds in Parliament, such as Aden Duale, doing the same.
Yes.
Now we have attacks on the judiciary the only instrument and body in the Republic of Kenya that is authorized by the Constitution and the law to interpret the Constitution and to interpret law and to determine conflict between parties, including between the government and its citizenry. They are attacking the judiciary. They are singling out judges that they believe did not make the ruling that they desired.
Thank you.
So we have a major threat posed by people who are determined to cling to power through illegal means. And we, as Kenyans, as the people whose destiny is being threatened, we are saying, and I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of people, we will not allow it.
Thank you. Let's leave it at that, and we'll also drill deeper on that much later. But I just want to take you back, because you're talking about the upgrade of the system and where actually Saffron is coming from with the upgrade, who has given them the mandate to actually do the upgrade. But if we look at the timelines of IBC, I think this was by Monday, the September the 4th. That is what they actually had put on their timeline there. If you may just look at that particular timeline, and it is also shaded blue there. Upgrade, configuration, and deployment of KIMS. This is where also Miguna was asking questions about the configuration as well. So this was within the time limits or the timelines of the IBC as well.
What is that?
Thank you, Dubal. I think that's the internal timeline
internal
developed by the
timelines.
IBC. And as I explain it, let me come back to one issue that Honorable Wamatanga and Honorable Ichung'wa spoke to. And unlike Honorable Ichung'wa, I respect them as honorable members. I will not call them the Jubilee Brigade. They are honorable members, and they must be respected as such. I have two problems whenever we discuss these issues of IBC and the elections with my colleagues from the Jubilee side.
Yes.
They always, instead of answering the question, and you remember you posed the question to Honorable Wamatangi, instead of answering the question, he went to what NASA says. I want to invite them, instead of, join NASA in looking for solutions rather than faulting NASA. Mm-hmm. Right now, it is incontestable that Saffron Mofo itself has stated that it is impossible for it to comply with the timelines, with the judgment. And instead of joining NASA to address that problem, they're attacking NASA. Mm-hmm. And yet Saffron is actually confirming what NASA said much earlier. Secondly, is diversionary tactics. When you ask my colleagues, and you ask even Honorable Ichung'wa, instead of addressing the issue, he takes you to 2013. He alleges this about the former PM, that about the former PM, and says nothing about what is at hand. Mm-hmm. I want to urge my colleagues that if we want to help this country, let us stop this thing of diversionary things, of attacking the person of the PM, of going to history, of bringing irrelevancies. Mm-hmm. Let us deal with what is at hand. What is at hand is that we have 60 days from the date of judgment to deliver credible, constitutional, and lawful elections. Mm-hmm. It is clear that with the infrastructure that is existent, that cannot happen. If we want to avoid another bungled, fresh presidential election, then we must sit and reason together, not attack, not call each other names. And let me now come to the IBC timelines. Part of the problem with the IBC timelines is what I said here about a fortnight ago.
Yes.
If before 8th of August, IEBC was prepared to the extent of 80% to conduct the general elections, it is clear right now it is only prepared to the extent of 40% to conduct these fresh presidential elections. If the IEBC systems were legitimate to the extent of 80% at that time, right now they are 30%. And part of the problem is that the IEBC, instead of learning from its mistakes, is doing what Jubilee is doing, questioning the wisdom of the Supreme Court in nullifying the elections. And it spends a lot of time justifying itself, oh, there were minor irregularities, it should not have been done. We are wasting time. IEBC cannot by itself sit down and develop those timelines. It cannot talk of reconfiguration of the KIMS kit before addressing why they refused to allow the kit to be accessed in the first place, why they refused, and why Saffron Mofo itself refused to comply with the court orders. You see, the issue is so fundamental If you have employed an accountant and he has stolen from you, you do not go to that accountant to audit that theft. You don't say, now I've given the accountant 3 days to give me the results. You can't do that. That is why we are taking the position that the issues are so fundamental enough that the chairman of IEBC himself has raised those issues and they're in the public domain. And yet IEBC does not think, and Jubilee does not think, that the answers to those questions deserve to be brought to the public. We can't talk of reconfiguration before we address what Safran Mofo did. We cannot talk of giving them 30 days when it is clear that what they are going to do is completely new, which can be done by any other person. They were single-sourced, and it means we can source any other person who does not have the integrity questions, who does not have the disabilities that they're suffering. And that is why, for me, the questions of the IEBC timelines are irrelevant. The IEBC must answer very, very fundamental questions, and not just by inviting people and saying we've covered this, not by being silent like they've done for the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
They have to do what the courts do. In law, we say that justice must be done, but it must be seen to be done. That's why at every stage the court always opens itself. IEBC must open itself to all the legitimate questions. It is not just Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga who want credible polls. It is every other person, including those who do not support any of them. They must come out. They must, when they talk of a meeting between the principals, they must lay out and indicate what are the issues. They should start by indicating what are the answers to the issues the chairman raised. What are the issues they want to discuss with Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta? What are the agreements? You know, so I think they're very fundamental questions.
All right. Let's hear from Kimani Matangi before we come to Ichung'wa.
Yeah, Dibal, two issues. Let me first.
So you agree you're skirting around the issues, you're not dealing with the issues?
That's what I want to deal with. But first, let's deal with the logic of Miguna.
The logic too.
You know, I mean, because you know, I want to simplify it more. It's really not even logic; it's common sense.
No,
I mean, because what you're trying to say is really run away from what I said, so that you can fit in your logic.
The logic.
But that's why I've simplified it to common sense. It's really not logic. I mean, I just the case that we made here is very simple, and what my issues were, Dibal. I said very simply. And Wakili, who was the lawyer who was in court, Otiende Amolo, did not oppose it. It is true. They built entirely their case on the so-called irregularities about transmission. But it is also a reality, and that's what I said, that we have a court ruling which upheld the minor K application, that the finality of the results of an election ends at the polling station. And that is what I said, that the true will of the people, immediately Kenyans went to the ballot, to the ballot, marked that ballot, put it inside the ballot box. That is the end of it. The will of the people is inside those ballot boxes. That's what I said. And so any other issue that Wakili, you remember yourself trying to show the algorithm and the application of X and Y axis, that was all about the transmission. So what we are saying, and the point I made is that whatever errors may have occurred, whatever case was made, and I also affirmed, I'm very curious, like many other Kenyans, to see then what will the Supreme Court be saying in its detailed ruling, now that we all know that in spite of all those irregularities that were cited, either honest or not, but the true will was never challenged. Because nobody came from NASA to say that somebody marked 20 ballot papers. Nobody came to say that this person went to vote and they were denied the right to vote. So the true will of the people, and as we know it, and remember Miguna, that the application, the persistence to have transmission electronically was a NASA agenda. And that's why one would want to know, could it be, as we said earlier, that because they knew that this is what they have insisted on, and they even went to court to refuse a complementary system. Is it because they knew they were going to use their people to subvert the election using either those fake forms during the transmission and so on? Those are the real questions. But now, you know, Honorable Wakili, as you raise this issue, with all due respect, there is no way you can argue that timelines are irrelevant in this argument, because it is cast clearly in the Constitution. It has got to be within 60 days. That is the directive of the Supreme Court. It has got to be within 60 days. So everything else that you are saying, as NASA or not, must be in realization that what you demand must be accommodatable within those 60 days. You cannot say that. And you see, there's a point that was raised here by Honorable Ichung'wa, which is very important. I mean, if Dibal, we are saying that these gentlemen are challenging Saffron Mofo, challenging Al Ghuraya, and they have a right to, but including Safaricom and Telcom, I mean, who then are they saying in their insistence and persistence that yes, election results must be transmitted electronically, then who is going to do it if including, and you see what they have said in your daily, I think it is in page 5, that they have identified that grouping that was used to subvert the elections, including those two companies, including Safaricom, including Telcom, including individuals in IEBC who must be changed. Then what we are saying, in the true spirit of goodwill and good intention, are these gentlemen ready for the election? And the answer is no, they are not. They are not. And you see, Wakili, lastly, when we make our comments on these issues, we are not making our comments on this issue to challenge the wisdom of the Supreme Court. On page 6 of the Standard, which you have there, Dibal, there is a whole story here that damning petitions link Mwilu and Linaola to NASA lawyers. It is here. It is a petition that has been filed. So what we are saying, when we are challenging this, we're asking, was there more than wisdom of the Supreme Court in this ruling? Were there other factors of influence? And you see, some of these things are coming up, and it is not unfathomable. It is not imperceivable, because remember, we had the Tunoi case just a few months before. We had this the Supreme Court ruling, and issues came out that indeed that there were possibilities a justice of the law of Kenya could have been compromised. So the questions, when we raise those questions, even in that ruling, is was there more than just the wisdom? And so we are not skirting around any issue. We want to go directly to the issue, but also point out, Wakili and your team from NASA, because it is in your interest, as has been demonstrated very clearly from all your actions, all the way before we went to the election, that you have not been intent and keen on having an election. Actually, you have used diversionary tactics.
Thank you. Let's hear from Kimani Matangi. Kimani Ichung'wa, sorry.
Kimani Matangi has just been speaking. Dibala, let me just also remind my good friend, Honorable Atienda Omolo, that the question you put to me was on allegations of bribery and Saffron Mofo. So I did not cut around any issues. I just took the ball back to where it belongs, that Saffron Mofo and Raila Odinga do know each other very well. And I have challenged you, Dibala, do invite the Honorable Eugene Wamalwa, who was a Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs, who sat in the meeting that he spoke about yesterday. If you also peruse reports in Parliament, the report of the Public Accounts Committee that investigated the 2013 procurement of kits, I think there are very weighty issues in that report. At the end of Molo, now you have the privilege being in Parliament to go and peruse that report and also speak to members of Parliament who even went to France to meet officers from Saffron Mofo, and they'll tell you how they know each other. Two, my colleagues have spoken about threats and said that people in Jubilee have threatened the judiciary. The president said he will revisit the issue, we will change the constitution. I don't think, Dubal, anybody has threatened anybody. All that the president said is that there are issues in the judiciary that need to be revisited. And I have said in other forums that indeed, when we changed our constitution and we changed many other institutions, part of the institution we wanted to change was the judiciary, and to a large extent we did. But there are certain fundamental problems that were there, existed in the judiciary, that still exist today, like being manipulated and run by cartels especially corruption cartels. Those are issues we need to revisit. And I don't want to belabor that. The other thing about threats, the people who have indeed not just threatened the judiciary but threatened the entire country are our colleagues in NASA.
Right.
Remember, only in May this year, they told us that there will be no elections in August if IEBC does not withdraw a case that was in court. I think that was on the, I can't remember what it was about. I think it was something to do with...
if you don't know, why are you talking about it?
There was a case that IEBC had filed, the review of the minor care judgment, actually. And they were threatening, if that appeal is not withdrawn, there will be no elections in August. The same threat we are hearing today, that if all these conditions are not met, there shall be no elections come next month. And I want to remind them, and something that the Deputy President told them then, and serves them very well today. And I quote that he said that threats, intimidation, and blackmail are the tools of trade of despots, dictators, and terrorists. And he challenged them to tell us what they are, whether they are dictators, terrorists, or despots. Today, Dibal, we've put the same questions to NASA. If you are telling us that there will be no elections, not just a boycott, because they have every right to boycott the elections, but they have no right to stop any Kenyan from going to exercise their democratic right to vote. Therefore, when they tell us there will be no elections, let them tell us. And I'm happy Atiendo Wambolo and their new spokesman, Miguna are here. They can tell us what tool of trade do you intend to use to stop elections from happening next month. If it is violence, if it is the coup, a coup as they've been asked. And yesterday I did hear them say, they were asked, Nyinyi ni nani? And they told us, you will know sisi ni nani. We want to know who you are. We want to know whether you are despots, whether you are dictators or terrorists. Because you cannot live threatening Kenyans. Tell us that constitutionally, this is what we will do to stop an election from happening. Otherwise, what we should be looking at as Kenyans, together, and I agree with Atiendo Omolo, we should be allowing IEBC as an independent institution to work their timelines within the court judgment of the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court was quite clear that elections must be held within 60 days from the date of their judgment. I think that takes us to about November 1st. So we have between October 17th and November 1st to allow IEBC to fix the problems that they had with irregularities, be they big or small, with illegalities, and also taking action. Let me finish, Dibal, because it's important also when we ask IEBC to get people together. And yesterday, only yesterday, the former Prime Minister and his NASA brigade told us that they are not even willing to meet or sit with IEBC until these absurd and weird demands are all met, including doing away with Safaricom and Airtel and Telcom. I don't know.
All right, thank you. But we want to look also. Thank you very much. All right, we want to look also at the hurdles that also maybe it's coming from. They're coming from Jubilee as well, because we want to ask ourselves: is presidential candidate Ekuro Aukot not eligible to run for the presidential election? Right? Why is President Kenyatta dismissing him as a busybody? And you've actually filed at the Supreme Court registry on Friday. We had President Kenyatta filing that particular, of course with his lawyers, petition saying that the only eligible contestants are him and Raila Odinga.
It is not Uhuru Kenyatta we're saying it, Dibal.
No, I said lawyers. These the lawyers who filed.
Uhuru Kenyatta is simply referring to the Supreme Court ruling of the 2013 petition. If you look at that ruling, then it is quite clear that only the two candidates.
Yes, in a moment we'll look at that ruling and see also the merits and the demerits of that ruling as well, as in regard to this particular lining of thought that we have here and the Constitution as well. And I think we'll also have the able wits of our lawyers here to take us through that as well. So do you think it is fair?
First of all, let me say this.
Yes.
Some of the most important things that you do when you're debating is that you have to have cognizance of history, you should have rudiments of logic, and you should be aware of science.
Yes.
My friends here have demonstrated that they don't understand logic, they clearly don't understand history, and they don't respect science. So Honorable Wamatangi started by saying that he was going to deconstruct my logic and never mentioned anything illogical about what I said. In fact, he ran away from his threat that he was going to deal with my logic. I want to deal with them right now because they are demonstrating all the fallacies that honorable members, but particularly those who respect going to school, should adhere to. Number one, Honorable Wamatangi has committed a fallacy of ignoratio elenchi, arguing from a point of ignorance. He says, first of all, he attacks the decision of the Supreme Court,
yes,
takes a swipe. But he does not understand that the Supreme Court makes decisions like any other court based on evidence, finds facts based on that evidence, and applies law to those facts to reach a determination. And that determination has already been arrived at. He cannot relitigate that case. The Supreme Court on September 1st reversed its decision of 2013. Not just on the standard of proof,
yes,
but on every other jurisprudential principles that were misapplied in that decision. And that is what they are trying to do. And that would inform also their declaration at the end that the election of August the 8th, the presidential election, was not just invalid, it was null and void. What is the meaning of that in layman's language? What it means is that there was no election on August 8th, 2017. There was no election. So therefore, you are doing a repeat. You are repeating everything that ought to have been done constitutionally and legally on August 8th, starting with the nomination of presidential candidates.
Yes.
Therefore, Ekuru Ekot must be allowed to run because there was no election. The Supreme Court has said, you cannot relitigate that. And unfortunately for my friends, are more experienced in law than they do, than they are. Therefore, they cannot overrule what I'm saying. Because not only am I right, even logically, I'm right because the Supreme Court said so. Number two, now, my friend Honorable Ichung'wa is saying that the office of the Prime Minister that I served in for a period of time was now the one in charge of procuring on behalf of the IBC. Is that even reasonable? Everybody knows IBC procures by itself. The office of the Prime Minister did not procure MOFO to come and supply the kits that he's talking about. So that also should be dismissed because we know how government procurement works. Number three, he talks about corruption and cartels of corruption and where they reside, and then quotes the worst person you should quote in the Republic of Kenya, the Deputy President, Honorable William Ruto, a man that has not just been accused of the worst corruption scandals in this country, but a man who has faced charges at the ICC, and a man whose name is the very definition of corruption. I wish to say that, and he can go to court tomorrow so that I can be able to prove it. So he says that this man said those who are seeking free, fair, and credible election to be despots, dictators, and or terrorists.
Oh, threatening.
Now, that's what he's saying. Now, who is more of a despot than a man who points at a Supreme Court judge and a Chief Justice and says, you will see me after these repeat elections? Who is a despot who says, because we have artificial numbers in the House, we are going to revisit the Constitution and we are going to change it? Who is more of a despot than a man who went in this country from place to place campaigning against the ratification of this Constitution? So I don't think Jubilee should be talking about despots. Having said that, on this report in the Standard about the so-called damning petition that link Justice Mwelu, the Deputy Chief Justice, and Justice Lenaola to NASA lawyers is egregiously defamatory.
Yes.
Number one, the ballot is public knowledge that Justice Njoki Ndung'u is married to Chris Murungaru, who is a member of Jubilee. And Justice Njoki Ndung'u has been photographed with David Murathe, who is a crony of the president. Number two, it is public knowledge that Justice J.B. Ojwang's wife is a PS appointed by President Uhuru Kenyatta. Now, this thing that they are now dangling about Justice Lenaola speaking with Ekuru Ekot and Senior Counsel Mwenezi within the precincts of the court. So essentially what these guys are saying, and unfortunately they don't practice law, is that if I go to court and meet a judge in the corridors of court, I'm not supposed to say hi, we are not supposed to talk, when these judges were lawyers before they were admitted to be judges. That is just ridiculous.
All right.
And then, no, I want to finish here, because this is very serious. This is a threat to the independence of the judiciary and to the Constitution itself. So now they have a busybody go to court with a petition, with purported records of telephone calls of judges. So what are you telling us? You are telling us not just that you are listening to Miguna's calls and you are recording him. You are actually recording Supreme Court judges. And you are not saying that you got a court order that authorized you to get these logs from Safaricom or whatever the telephone provider is. You are saying you are able to do it outside the law, then go to court and seek relief. There is something called there's a principle of law that my friend should remember. It's called the principle of equity. It says that to get equity, you must approach the court with clean hands. If you come with unclean hands, you cannot be given equity. This man now subverts the constitutional rights of lawyers, of judges, subverts the Constitution, violates the privacy of Kenyan citizens, if at all the logs are even true.
Thank you.
And I'm not saying they are. And then purports that they can extract justice from this very, very judiciary that they're attacking and saying are corrupt. I will want to advise the judiciary to do what the Supreme Court in Pakistan did. By their own motions, sui moto, they should discuss the behavior of His Excellency the President, his deputy, all these Jubilee busybodies that have been attacking them, and should arrive at a ruling that should send these people to the place they belong, which is the dustbin of the history of this country.
All right, thank you. So what do you want to pick from here as well? And I want to also go back, because you say that, yes, being married or being seen in the corridors of power with some of the people that are connected to the Supreme Court does not in any way have bearing also to actually the ruling that they did make. Because, of course, everyone in Kenya, you're related to someone somewhere in a big office. And that one does not really have any bearing, right, to maybe the judgment they will make in any particular case. But what we want to also establish is the fact that I asked the question about Ekuru Aukot being eligible to run for this particular election. So is it clear that we cannot really base that particular notion that he cannot on the 2013 ruling?
Let me speak to that.
Yes, please.
And speak to two issues that my colleagues have spoken to. First of all, it was, and I said it a fortnight ago, it was a strategic mistake for the IEBC to go to the 2013 ruling, pick a paragraph in the judgment of Mutunga, which was not relevant to that case, and which was intended to explain a point in that case, and then transpose it to the instant Supreme Court decision, and purport that on that basis, only two people are eligible. As a matter of law, they were wrong. And because they were wrong, and that goes to what I was saying, that there's always need for IBC to open itself up and consult. Now, they put themselves in an even greater danger. And the danger is, Ekuru Court went to court, and as far as I know, I think the matter is coming up this Thursday. And if therefore the Supreme Court again finds that he's eligible to run, all the timelines you are talking about, and which Honorable Ichung'wa holds so dear, dissipates. And yet, the absolute deadline in terms of 60 days remains. It complicates the scenario. Having said that, let me come to the specific comments. I really think that an honorable member like Ichung'wa should measure his language. He is vile, he is base, and is pedestrian. When you are talking as an honorable member and people are watching you, surely you should choose the kind of language you use and focus on the issues. Let us come to the issue of the judges. And I don't want to repeat anything that has been said. But I think it is singularly unfortunate that any national newspaper should take a scheme that is clearly laid out by the NSIS and make it national headlines. But I'm not going to focus on what is said. I'm going to focus on what it's intended to do. What this is intended to do is what the president said, that he will deal with the judges of the Supreme Court. And the first way to deal with it was to ask Honorable Wambugu Ngunjiri to come to court and threaten the removal of the Chief Justice. The scheme was so that the Jubilee team and the president would later come and condemn it. But it was schemed because the night before that, we got messages that at 9:30 a.m., there will be a major announcement at the Supreme Court. And if you want to know it was schemed, any petition to remove the Chief Justice, you don't take it to the Supreme Court. The Judicial Service Commission is not at the Supreme Court. Their offices are in Mayfair. And anybody who wants to petition takes it to Mayfair. But it had to be brought to the Supreme Court for the full drama. And the idea was that then at 12:30, there was to be another press conference at Norfolk. What happened is that the backlash was so fundamental that they had to withdraw. What have they now done? Not to use any known member of Jubilee who's an MP and get some NSIS operatives with some pseudonyms appearing to be from Mombasa and use information and bring it here.
But
and it's intended to do two things. Do you have any
stitch of evidence that
it's
they're
intended to do two things. You and I cannot get records of anyone in terms of phone calls. Who else can get? Would Safaricom or any provider give you that? It can't. So it's not even whether they spoke or not. The fact of purporting that you have the records of phone call conversation without a court order means you must be an NIS operative. Now, it's intended to do two things, Dubal. One, the timing, coming a day or two before the Supreme Court gives, and it's not a ruling, it's a judgment, the full judgment. It is intended to scare some of these judges so that their judgment does not have that sting. If there's that sting, they could try and remove it and tamper it because the threat is, weigh what you say because we are watching you. That's number one. Number two, it's intended to threaten judges generally and the judiciary. There are 338 petitions now pending. And the message is supposed to go that there are two general formations, the NASA formation and the Jubilee formation. Any judge or magistrate handling it, please know that we are watching you and we can expose you. That is terrible. That is myopic, that is short-sighted, and that will eventually come to haunt the Jubilee and the schemers themselves. And I think it is gravely unfortunate.
All right, let's hear from Senator Kimani Watangi.
Yeah. Yes, Dibal, two quick issues. Probably, if you allow me, Miguna raised some few issues which probably I would want to mostly ignore most of them because and I think I would be a bit surprised when I hear Wakili Otiende Amolo first referring to my colleague Ichung'wa at his language is base, his language is vile, his language is pedestrian, and he's sitting next to the most pedestrian, to the most vile. to the most, you know, let me tell you, and that's why I said I would rather ignore Miguna's comments, because you see, and you remember, Dibal, when you were here, you invited.
You need to be clear. Who is sitting to the most?
You invited.
Okay, fine.
Remember last? No, I said Wakili is sitting next to the most vile, because you remember, actually you invited Mutahi Kagwe here in our last show, and Mutahi Kagwe was saying, in fact, he was writing a note here to himself and saying that you know, Miguna, he told him, stop being a bitter loser when you're making this argument on this platform. Because, I mean, you know, sometimes the language you use, please borrow the words used by Wakili. They were intended for you, maybe he was deflaying them. So that he doesn't say them direct. But I tell you,
just let him finish.
But I tell you, Miguna,
we'll give you time to respond.
one of the most important things that you need, I mean, when you're on national TV, you can't speak like you have nothing to lose in life. I mean, you're confirming probably that the Prime Minister was right in sending you away, you know, from his office. I mean, who would contain a man who speaks like that? I mean, and you are a candidate recently in the gubernatorial in any race in Nairobi, my friend. How do you expect voters to vote for you when you're talking like that, man? Come on, you know, you have to smarten up. You know, you cannot be a kamikaze, you know, a do or die
Okay, thank you.
anchor here.
Right,
I mean,
just deal with the issue. We'll give you time
yes,
to
you know,
respond as
We
well.
can't deal with the issues.
no, I have a lot of issues to deal with.
with
But
issues.
but
stop for time.
first, it is important to let
established.
Miguna know
Okay.
that it is important that he observes at least basic decorum when he's here. Basic decorum. You don't have to talk about all those places you've got. We have been to many places, my friend. Now, listen, my brother, I wanted to point out this last issue raised by Wakili. And Wakili, let's face these things the way they are. You know, saying that this kind of headline that has been run by the newspaper is intended to remove sting and scare judges. Nothing could be more untrue. Nothing could be more untrue. Because you see, and remember when we debated here last, when we were asking what are these things that some of the members in Jubilee are saying would require to be corrected and amended in law to make it right. For example, in the simple power that the Supreme Court has got, that they can go and render a decision without first affirming and supporting that decision. That's something that needs to be corrected. And ask yourself, Dibal, what sting would you remove out of a decision made by the Supreme Court that already served the consequences? I mean, the consequence of that decision is that the election is annulled. What other sting do you remove? I mean, the ruling, the detailed ruling coming out is just formality. It's just to inform you. It's academic. But for any matter prosecuted or taken to court, it is the punishment. It is the final consequence of it that you try to prevent either by supporting or by opposing. So here there is nothing about sting. And what we need to be saying, and that's what I want to direct to Wakili, we cannot apply double standards. We had in detail the case against Justice Tunoi, and details that one would be wanting to ask, including communications. That's part of the evidence that was laid there. But there were phone calls. Let me first make my case, my friend.
But
remember, wait, Debal, wait. Remember that the person who initiated the most radical surgery against his own fellow judges, including mass transfers, was the predecessor of Justice Maraga, Chief Justice Mutunga himself, in acknowledgement that within the judiciary exists terrible rot. He had to fire judges. He had to send others on compulsory leave and mass transfer everybody. An acknowledgement. So the fact that when you are trying to dig in a case, and there are no... Miguna, I don't believe in your being a very good lawyer, so let me address the other one. I mean, you know, as a lawyer, you know that when you are pursuing truth and justice, there are no limits. So you, this here I have. By the way, I just saw this, but I saw it as a telecommunications company here that was laying these claims. How do you know? Wait for the evidence to tell us that this is how the evidence, the information is acquired. But you cannot start to purge the matter before you ask how. Are you protecting them? And lastly, this is something that NASA will not run away from at all, whatever they do. That they have a grand scheme. Whatever they say, and they call Jubilee, that you are busybodies or whoever, we aren't busybodies in Jubilee. We are factual and grounded in law, and we are clear to NASA. We can see them from many miles away, what they want.
Thank you.
They have been in pursuit of paralyzing the system so that there's no election on the 17th and in the 60 days, so that they can find a way, assisted by legal minds like Otiende Amolo and the rest of the lawyers, and that's why Wetangula was speaking, to ensure that they can find their way in government without having to go to an election. That is the whole story. It's the bottom line.
You know, Dibal, first let me say I'm an accountant. I'm not a lawyer. And like my good friend Atiende Omolo, who is still excited in being an honorable member, and therefore he will have this tirade about being honorable members and the language I should use. And I'll tell you, Atiende, I will use whatever language I desire to use, because I have to say it as it is. Whether it pleases you or not, that's your business, not mine.
But we need to take cognizance of the fact that also language that is admissible on this show as well.
Of course, I have not said anything, Dibal, in this show.
And the same comment to Miguna
is more injurious. Yes, is more injurious to a person than what Miguna has said here.
All right, thank you.
Therefore, if there's anyone who is using language that I would not even get into, is my good friend Miguna, who I don't know where he practiced law. I don't know if he's ever practiced law in this country or anywhere.
It's not even
the
street
world.
language.
He has a reputation. He might have practiced law.
Let's get to the issues.
Cannot be admitted
where we do not.
No. We don't want to degenerate this debate now to personal issues. Just go straight to the point, please.
That's
All of you. This is to all of you, please.
But raise the bar.
That's why
Please.
That's why the bar.
Yeah, we've talked about it. To your point, please.
That's why I just started off with that, so that we make it clear that it is not right that you attack the person from one end and accuse others of doing the same when they are not doing that. It's the same thing we are talking about here. We are talking about threats, Dibal. We have not threatened anybody in the judiciary. You are talking about Wambugu Ngunjiri threatening the Supreme Court by doing what constitutionally he has a right to petition the removal of any judge, not just of the Supreme Court, but even of the High Court or the Court of Appeal. And Ngunjiri Wambugu is not the first Kenyan to do that. Apollo Mboya, who was the CEO of the LSK, had indeed petitioned for the removal of Justice Maraga before Ngunjiri Wambugu did it. You didn't hear all this noise about it. But anyway, because it is Jubilee, it is wrong. It becomes a threat when Jubilee talks about a decision that the court has made, criticizes that decision, but says we respect that institution that has made that decision, but we do not agree with it. But it is not a threat when the NASA brigade, before going to court, threatens the judiciary and tells the Supreme Court that this is your opportunity to redeem the Supreme Court. And because they got what they wanted, then the Supreme Court now has redeemed itself and is a bench of angels. The attacks on the persons of the judges in the Supreme Court, Njoki Ndung'u, Ojwang, I mean, if we wanted to get into that, there are also connections between Justice Mwilu and Amos Wako.
Please, we don't want to really go to those.
But we do not want to get into those things.
Yes.
Dibal, because those are side shows.
That's why I say
I don't even want to get to the issues,
we are going to open that web, everyone
that are not even
just
read.
a moment.
I do not want to get into the issue of the case that is before the court that Atiende Omolo says the accrual court case.
All right. My point is
that will be had this week.
My point is, it's a tangled web. If you open this web, everyone is connected to everyone in this country.
Precisely. So therefore, Dibal, that's why I'm saying I do not even want to comment about these petitions because I've not even read what the newspapers
in its entirety.
Are
so we shouldn't even raise it on this show.
The same way, Dibal, we should even be devoid of commenting on a case that is before the court that is coming up for hearing before the same Supreme Court that made that decision in 2013. Therefore, we just need to wait for today and tomorrow, and we will get to know the facts of the case and whether the Supreme Court is ready and willing to review its own judgment of 2013.
All right, thank you.
But let me finish on something on threats debate.
Yes.
Because I did say that, and I quoted William Ruto rightly, so as much as Miguna may not like it, that threats, intimidation, and blackmail are the tools of trade of despots, dictators, and terrorists. The people threatening us and threatening this country, actually, they've already threatened the judiciary. They are now threatening IEBC, telling people that you better run before we come for you. Officers, public officers serving in public office. They are threatening Kenyans that there shall be no elections. Then we ask them, who are you to threaten Kenyans and tell them there are no elections? What tools of trade do you want to use to ensure that there is no election? I have put that question here before, Debal, and in other fora, the same question has been put to the NASA people. They are not willing.
Thank you.
They are not ready to tell Kenyans.
We might be having the answer to that.
No, they intend to use. And I'll tell you, despots, Debal, are those who have a history of trying to use either military coups, like happened in 1982, to take over reins of power. Despots and dictators are those who oversaw the mass killing of Kenyans in 2007 to attain political office. And we're only saying that we will not allow the same despots, dictators, and terrorists
thank you very much.
use violence as a tool to stop elections from happening in this country.
But
the timelines, Atienda Omolo spoke about the ban. Let me just finish off with that. He said the timelines are dear to me. Atienda Omolo, I want to tell you, timelines are not dear to me.
Thank you.
It is the court that ruled, and it is in our constitution that elections must be held within 60 days. Atienda Omolo was a lawyer litigating for NASA in court. Why didn't NASA, when you took your plane to court, take a plane to ask the court to give orders for IEBC not to conduct this election? You never did that. Therefore, you cannot come back to the court of public opinion to tell IEBC you will not conduct this election unless you meet these conditions. You should have had that as a prayer in court, and the court then would have ordered that IEBC does not hold elections or supervise them.
As we're winding up, we just want to play a bite by William Ruto. Just as you're winding up, the bite by William Ruto, that one maybe will also establish where all this debate is headed to between NASA and Jubilee, just in a moment.
When our competitors say that it is not that they want to boycott the election, that there will be no election in Kenya, what are they telling us? There can only be two ways where there will be no election in Kenya. Either there will be a coup, or there will be violence and chaos.
All right, your 30 seconds as we're winding up, Honorable Otende Molo and Miguna, 30 seconds as well. We need to wind up.
But I have to respond to
Let's begin with Otende Molo, please.
Debal, I think it is singularly unfortunate that we have not helped Kenyans understand where we are at all in terms of whether we'll have elections. What we've had is Honorable Ichung'wa and Honorable Wamatangi throwing vile remarks all over the place. I think we remain exactly where we are. I think I want to urge some level of sobriety, and that sobriety must come from IEBC. It is good that they've invited some talks, but those talks must be meaningful and they must be structured, otherwise we are going nowhere. One of the easiest ways not to have an election is the way we are going. You don't even need NASA. Now, if we go this way, even if NASA was not involved, you will surely have a situation where you will have fraudulent and shambolic elections which will be nullified. The last thing, the court did not just nullify the elections. The court found that there were irregularities and illegalities. Illegalities in that context speaks to criminal acts. The entire last election was a criminal enterprise with so many players that in the fullness of time, we will come to know.
Thank you. Miguna, 30 seconds.
Yes, first of all, I would like to say that all that I have heard from both Honorable Ichung'wa and Wamatangi is called verbiage in English. It means absolutely nothing. They wanted to attack my character and impugn things on my credibility. But where I practice law, I'm a barrister and solicitor in Canada, these two gentlemen cannot be admitted to high school. Having said that, the threats to the judiciary was publicly made by the President of the Republic of Kenya. He said he would fix not just Justice Maraga,
Thank you,
but he would fix the judiciary and he would change the constitution. The final thing is this, and this is what my friends want to run away from. We must have an independent forensic audit of the IEBC systems. all their systems, including the servers and KIMS kits. And we must deal with the fraudsters that subverted the will of the Kenyan people at the
30
ICC
seconds
before
over.
we can have new elections.
Wamatangi, please. 30 seconds.
Yes, quickly, on that argument that you fronted quite a lot, Debal, on the web of connections between people. Remember that if you are a judge of the High Court or sitting in the bar, you must disclose, and that is why judges step aside in case you have contact or connections with people, whether they are family or not, who may contaminate the case. Secondly, on this clip there that you have played there with Ruto, it's been all over, and we live in this country that NASA has been plotting that there will be violence, they will instigate violence, so there is no election. And if they do so because that's what they're intending to do, then they should know that there is a recourse in law, that we must have an election. And let me say quickly that I would never mind not to be admitted in a high school where Miguna is the principal. I would have no regrets.
Thank you.
If he was the principal,
all right, thank you.
I would go away without the high school.
Dibala just speak to the illegalities and irregularities. The irregularities, we can leave IEBC to correct the irregularities. Whatever illegalities, Dibala, we know the presiding officers, the returning officers, when we get the full judgment who may have perpetuated these illegalities, and the DPP has clearly said that he will take action on that. Lastly, let NASA tell Kenya how they intend to stop an election from happening through constitutional means and legal means. If not, what they are being told is a threat to instigate violence in this country.
Thank you.
And therefore become the despots that I truly believe they are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank you for your cogent input this morning. We've been able to really to tackle one or two issues this morning, and so I really appreciate your input this morning, our honorable members. Also, thank you very much for your valued company and also sharing your morning. You've been watching People and Politics here on AM Live, running on Decision 2017. You're in a tearing rush to go for breakfast.